Hello and welcome to this video on the Oct Tone Eurorack module and the Glasgow Synth Guild. Let's check out what's to come. This video is sponsored by Jason Lim, the designer of the Oct Tone. So you may have seen the Glasgow Synth Guild come to life online with the release of the Oct Tone. But it's not a normal gear brand, so you might have some questions, and I certainly did, so I put some questions to the guild so we could learn who and what they are. And I'll just read out their responses to my questions here. What is the Glasgow Synth Guild? The Guild is a collective of synth builders in Glasgow who have set up as a creative resource for independent developers. They manufacture modules and other electronic instruments for others. Who's involved in the project? Jimmy, Matthew, Tash and Dermot are the Guild Masters. They are the core group of the Instruo manufacturing team, who will now be working outside the realms of Instruo as well. Why does the Glasgow Synth Guild exist? The Instruo crew expanded quickly through the pandemic and for several years now have been building up a lot of experience building a wide range of products. The goal for the guild is for the builders to operate as their own entity, showcasing their skills and expertise that have come from that experience. Instrument design is just one part of the puzzle that is Eurorack, and a huge amount of work goes on behind the scenes when it comes to actually producing a batch of modules. So the guild can apply these skills not only to Instruo production, but for other designers as well. What does the future hold for the guild? Collaboration is the model, and within Instruo HQ, where the guild operates, there are many creative designers. Instruo very much has its own look and design approach led by Jason, but so much more is being created by people behind the scenes that each have their own individual styles. The Guild has become a resource for others in-house to create and develop in direct partnership with those that actually build the things. But the Guild isn't just there for people in-house, we'll see collaborations spread much further in the future. And also just to note, Instruo isn't going anywhere, but the possibilities are quite possibly endless for what the Guild can bring. And as a final question, as this is a question I've seen users raise online, why does the Oct Tone look like an Instruo module? The Oct Tone is a design by Jason from Instruo, and it's a remaster of one of his early designs. It looks like an Instruo module because that's just Jason's style of design. Future collaborations will look like other brands and the designers that they work with, as the guild produce the gear with and for other people. And as a side note from me reading out these responses from the guild, it was interesting for me to learn that the guild have already built a batch of modules for an external brand. And with that in mind, I'll certainly be leaning on them personally for some ideas in the future. Now, on to the Oct Tone. The Oct Tone is a 10 HP 8-step CV pulse sequencer with plenty of musical features. We have buttons that select the activity for the pulses, a mini pot per step for the CV value, a quantizer that can move through no quantization or one of 6 scales, there's an internal clock with a wide-ranging rate control, and an external clock input and retrigger and reset. We can play the sequence forwards, in a pendulum, or in random directions. There's a classic sequencer mode and then a pulse count mode that adds step repeats and step holds, and a tune mode that allows you to go in and fine-tune your controls per step. You can link 2 units to expand to 16 steps, and this also unlocks several other features like transposed duophonic sequencing, and an interesting kind of weird code bug that led to some burst generation. So in the video I'll go through these features with various musical examples and approaches. The patches are on screen, so skip around as you see fit. And let's dive in. So let's just quickly overview the features and interface by just making a basic sequence. This is running on its internal clock. And let's turn on these steps to start triggering. And on this button and these LEDs, we can see our quantization settings. We'll start with these off, and I'll just start turning knobs to start to generate a sequence. And an unquantized sequence in this kind of setting isn't that musical. Let's add some quantization, whether that's chromatic, major scales, or pentatonics. We'll stick to pentatonics, really nice and easy to work with. And if we wanted to dial in and kind of fine-tune these steps, if we go across on this switch to the tune mode, we can use retrigger, which will be high as long as we press the retrigger. So I'm going to make my envelope respond to this. I can generate a note, just a high gate to keep this filter open, and we can then dial in each pitch. So go back to the clocked mode. Nice and easy to dial in. We can have anywhere from 1 step and any number up to all 8. So here's a 5-step sequence now. And we'll play through this randomly and start to turn some steps off. Let's go back to all 8 steps. And it's really fun to just jam with this live, playing around with the values, playing around with steps on and off, direction and steps amount. So here we're looking at sequencer direction and also stepping through it with the clock input with non-steady clocks, gate sequences or randomly skipping clock sources. You can see on these LED cables and the activity that this isn't firing all the time. Let's actually set this in its most basic sense, forward motion on these switches. I'll retrigger them both to the same step and then patch in a steady clock. I'm accenting the first step with the gate out there, just triggering a soft bass drum in the background for a bit of low end. And we can move to all the way to the right, pendulum, forwards and backwards motion. And in the middle, we can go random. And this is the same clock coming into both of these. Let's move this to be forward motion for pitch and some of my modulation, and let this one be random. And if I then use a non-steady clock, there's some probability-based skipping in this gate rhythm. We can step through all this information randomly. It doesn't have to be a steady clock at the input. So here I'm getting 5 drum parts out of a single Oct Tone. It's an excess of stacking cables here, and it's a little bit ridiculous looking. But we can make 5 different rhythms, or more depending on how you want to patch, with a single Oct Tone. Now the first one is the kick drum on this yellow cable, and it's the trigger output here, where turning on these buttons, simply turning on the steps creates a rhythm for me to trigger my kick drum with. The clap is this orange cable just down here, and it's step 5 just coming out, single step output to trigger the sound. And then everything else is this kind of concoction of mixing together step outputs on stacking cables, such as these pink cables here, which are all my hi-hat or noise sound. And these are literally just stacking tendrils cables. And just as a word of warning, if you're going to try this anything else, check with the manufacturer this is okay to do, because you're kind of breaking the only real ruling modular here, which is patching an output back to an output. I checked with Jason here, the designer, and this is fine. You're not going to break the module, but you will lose a little bit of voltage every time you split it. As you can hear, it's fine for me here. I'm getting this noise percussion out of mixing these pink cables. The CV output, pink cable just up top here, you might not be able to see, is the length of the sound. And then I have a rim shot on these blue cables, passively mixing them on these stacking cables, stacking these step outputs into each other before triggering a drum sound. Green cables, a little maraca sound, so all together 5 different drum parts from a single Oct Tone. So in the tune mode here, you can of course use this to tune, to set your voltages, but I have this set up here, almost like a bank of 8 stored voltages that I'm going to play with the buttons to select chord types with my chord quantizer. The CV output comes into a harmony that's generating voltages to play various oscillators. Really simple use of the module, but it's handy having these stored voltages that you manually address for your patches. So let's take a look at the pulse count mode. The pulse count mode on this top switch here in the center doesn't do anything until we set it up in the tune mode. Simply select a step and then turn the step knob, and you can see these dimly lit LEDs fill these step buttons, and that's how many steps that step will be active for. So we have the first step selected. Let's make this last for 8 steps and go back to the pulse count mode for this to now play. And there's one other behaviour that we set in this tune mode here, and that's whether these steps repeat or not. If we double tap the button and watch this LED, if it's a short, very short little orange pulse, you don't get pulse repeats, it just holds with a single pulse at the start, which is what's happening here. We're not getting da-da-da-da-da on the same notes, we just get a single pulse present here. If we double tap this for a longer pulse, and you just double tap short, long, just to change the behaviour each time. If this is a longer burst of LED, orange LED there, this now repeats. So let's go in and say, make this not repeat. So I'm going to double tap it again and let's make it 4 steps. Let's select step 2, we'll make this 3 steps. And select step 3 and make it 2 steps. So we'll get 4 steps, 3 steps, 2 steps, and then 1 all the way around. And let's go back into tune and we'll make the middle one, let's double tap it. Actually repeat the steps, but the other ones won't. Now we can still get into the different directions of play. This is really nice with the random play, where we create pauses on these longer steps that don't repeat the pulse, and then some steps that do repeat the pulse and last for longer step counts. So in modular, I really like having multiple sequencers around, and certainly ones with knobs on as opposed to being kind of digital in their interface, so that I can grab things and jam around and kind of pull sounds around. Both of these Oct Tones are controlling my kick drum. So starting with these with everything at 0, I'm bringing in a swung clock. This is a clock with some swing and a bit of a shuffle to it, and a reset to keep both of these in time as I start, stop my sequence, change tempos, and just to keep things locked in with everything else in the patch. This trigger out on the left Oct Tone, yellow cable here, is going to define my kick drum rhythm. So let's add in some steps. I'm then using the sequence from this one to control the length of the sound. So let's turn up the first step. And the one after it to keep that voltage high. Get this nice boom at the start of the sequence. I'm using this Oct Tone and its trigger out to create a little transient click. It's triggering another voice that I'm considering kind of like a beta hit on top of the kick drum. Now if I add that into the kick, and let's play the same sequence, kind of works like a bit more transient and a bit more kind of smack at the front of the note, if you like. But it's quite fun to actually play different rhythms. And the sequence on this right hand Oct Tone controls the pitch. And it's nice just to play around and find patterns that just work really well, as I say, to craft this sound as opposed to just triggering a basic drum voice. Here it is against the other basic drum voices. Now here we're looking at some dual Oct Tone 16-step linked sequencing. Now I've gone through and selected some steps, just as we have through the rest of the video, to trigger both rings and this low pass gate, and just set up a quantized pitch here, just set to a major scale. Now this switch is repurposed when this is in linked mode, and it acts as a transposition switch alongside the step knob. To the left, this will transpose relative to the quantization. And it's this TSL low pass gate voice that we're transposing. Let's play that against rings. In the center, it removes that transposition, and all the way right is unquantized transposition. So let's set up a 16-step sequence from scratch, and I'll start by choosing which steps I want to strum and activate the notes. And let's just start turning some knobs. I'm already set to major quantization here, major scale quantizing. And then let's bring in this secondary voice, TSL, into the low pass gate, and transpose. And it's a really nice interface to work with for quickly setting up sequences. You can still play with direction. So I can't have two separate sequences without running them polymetrically. And all that means is to run them from the same clock, so the length of each step is the same, each note length is the same, but simply to run them over different pattern lengths. These are both set to 3-step sequences. Let's take the right one to 4. So this is 3 against 4, but not a polyrhythm, but a polymeter. Let's take this to 5. And I have some percussion here triggered from this first step just to accent what's going on. On the left-hand side, hard left, is a hi-hat. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then on the right is a maraca. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You get the idea. So these just accent these start points, and you can hear how this polymeter develops. The 3 against the 5. It's really fun, even though this is just a really basic set of voices and melodies. So here's an interesting feature that is actually a bug that Jason was telling me about earlier in the module's development, that's kind of now in here as a feature. Now if I come to this output, the red cable here, this is triggering a hi-hat sound. And if the rate on this output is higher, it actually pushes through this faster clock from the right-hand module, even though they're linked and it's this left-hand clock in charge of the whole thing. And on the steps that have active pulse counts higher than 1 pulse counts, we actually get bursts coming through at the rate set on this knob. So just like you would before, you go into tune mode, you pick a step, you can use the step knob to set the amount of steps on that step. You can see those dimly light and go around, and you can double tap to choose whether any step counts, step repeats, have a repeating pulse or a normal pulse. If you come out of the right hand pulse out, you get extra bursting clocks defined by this knob. So if you've got this far in the video, go drop a hard sync in the comments. Head over to patreon.com/DivKid to support the work that I do, gaining access to the community over on Discord and plenty of exclusives. Hit the thumbs up, the like and subscribe, that all helps out the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye.